Hey guys, welcome to another Project Untethered video. I'm gonna need you to buckle up for this one because in this video we're gonna do a full-on masterclass on how to become a digital nomad. This isn't gonna be just another one of those quick videos that covers things superficially. This is the whole enchilada, including resources for further investigation and a bunch of different freebies sprinkled throughout the video, so make sure you watch to the end. We're gonna take it step by step and cover choosing a job, choosing the best digital nomad location, setting a realistic budget, knowing how much of a savings cushion that you should have before you leave, how to find super affordable accommodation, how to stay safe on the road, how to stay productive on the road, and basically everything you need to know to become a digital nomad. Now guys, this is gonna be a big picture video. We're gonna cover everything, but in the future, we'll do specific videos on each one of these topics. So if you're interested in those videos, make sure to subscribe to be notified when they get released. I just want to say, while the digital nomad life is awesome and it allows you to work in amazing places around the world and experience things that most people will never be able to experience, the truth is most digital nomads either fail, give up, or they burn out. So at the end of this video, I'm going to share my #1 tip on how you can avoid this and how you can make sure you stay successful as a digital nomad. And with that, let's roll the intro. Alright guys, before we get started, I just want to mention, obviously with everything that's happening in the world right now, before we go jet setting off to some exotic location, you want to make sure that it's safe. So depending on when you watch this video, you may or may not have to wait a bit before you set off on your adventure. The good news is that there's a bunch of preparation work to do before you become a digital nomad, and this stuff doesn't happen overnight. So while you're waiting, you have plenty of stuff to keep you busy. Alright guys, let's get started with step #1, choosing the right digital nomad job for you. And honestly, this is one of the biggest obstacles that new digital nomads face. Either you don't think you have any skills and you have no idea what you could possibly do to earn money as you travel around the world, or the opposite problem is you have so many different ideas and know that there's so many different options for different travel jobs that you have no idea which one to choose. If you're struggling to decide on a digital nomad job, I put together a quick little workbook that will help you work through the process and figure out which is best for you. But the first step, no matter where you are, is knowing what all your options are. And guys, you have tons of options for making money on the road. Your first step is going to be going down to the link in the description where I have a post where I've written over 100, I think we're now at 115 different travel job ideas. So step 1 is, after this video, go to that post and read through all the different job options you have and write down anything that excites you. But when it comes to travel jobs, we can normally break it up into 3 different categories. The first category is remote work. Remote work is probably the quickest way to get off the ground and get off on your trip earning money, but also it offers the least flexibility of the 3 different categories. That's because you're still working on the clock of your employer. So you might be off in Thailand somewhere and all your digital nomad friends that you met are going off to the beach someday, but you can't go because you need to be online working. Now that's the downside to remote job, but the upside is it's super quick to start. You might even already have a job that you can take remote, and if not, online you can find tons of different remote jobs. And the other upside is job stability. As you'll see in the next 2 categories, they're not quite as stable as remote work, where all your work each day is just handed to you on a silver platter. The second category is freelancing jobs, and freelancing jobs usually fall in a mid-level tier in terms of flexibility and ease to get started. Unlike a remote job where you start getting paid a normal salary almost immediately, with freelancing you have to build it up over time. However, unlike a remote job, you do have a little bit more control over your time. Remember, freelancing is basically working kind of as a contract worker, providing different services to your clients online. That could be freelance writing, like what I do, freelance graphic design, freelance computer programming. There's tons and tons of different freelance jobs out there. And once you've landed a few clients and have different projects to work on, you can basically manage your time how you see fit. If your friends are going to the beach, you can stop work and go to the beach and then finish your work later at night. I would consider this time freedom level 2. While you do have more flexibility, you still have to answer to your clients at the end of the day. Now, if you decide that you do want to start freelancing freelancing, there's a bunch of different ways to start. Some of the most popular ways are getting your foot in the door on sites like Upwork or Fiverr, but in many cases, these probably aren't the places you want to work forever because it's hard, not impossible, but it's very hard to get repeated, constant, high-paying work on those types of sites. To earn well as a freelancer, you have to eventually go off of those platforms and find your own private clients, hopefully big clients with big budgets who are able to afford to pay you a fair price. We'll definitely be covering this more in future videos. Now, category 3 of travel jobs is an online entrepreneur. This one takes the longest to start up, but it also gives you the most freedom and flexibility to live digital nomad life on your own terms. Examples of this would be things like starting your own blog or YouTube channel, which is what we do, or starting an e-commerce store, selling on Amazon, selling on Shopify, creating an application, or basically anything that involves you going into business for yourself. And obviously, when you go into business for yourself, you're your own boss. When you don't want to work, you don't have to work. When you want to work extra, you can work extra. For many digital nomads, this is the end goal because of the flexibility, and normally there's less of a pay cap, you can earn more, you can just keep growing. But not all digital nomads are cut out for that type of work. If you're the type of person who doesn't mind more of a rigid schedule and prefers to have all the work handed to them each day, then a remote job may be perfect for you. And you may even want to mix it up. You may want to start with a remote job while you build your entrepreneur business on the side, or start with freelancing while you do something else on the side. Or another popular option many people do to get off traveling as soon as possible is they'll go to a country like South Korea or China and teach English, where they can earn good money, save a bunch of money, and also start up another digital nomad business on the side. Really, you have tons of different options, and the truth is, you don't have to pick the perfect job as your first job. You can always change and try one thing, try another thing. That's okay. In fact, I'd go as far to say that that's what most digital nomads do. Most don't know exactly what they want to do before leaving home. They get their feet wet here, they try teaching English, they try freelancing, they start building their business, they find other opportunities while they're on the road. If you're stuck on choosing a job, just pick the one that looks most interesting and fastest to start earning money, and from there, see where things go. I also highly recommend avoiding a big digital nomad mistake that is trying to do everything for free and get off the ground and learn everything you need to learn, all for free. Trust me, you want to invest in yourself, whether that be a course to learn the skill that you want to learn or different tools to help you speed up the process. I and many other digital nomads make the mistake of trying to be cheap all the time and save money, but in the end, investing in yourself will save you tons and tons of time and mistake and headaches. And for me, I'd much rather spend $500 or $1,000 or whatever if it means that I can save 500 hours of working and going down the wrong path and going down rabbit holes and whatnot. All right guys, on to step number 2, and that is choosing your destination. Now there are tons of different factors that you have to consider when choosing your digital nomad destination. The first factor, obviously, in this time of the world is where you're allowed to go, what countries are open. But in the future, once countries open up again, you'll have many more options. That said, you also need to consider your visa situation. Now, I'm not an expert on visas for citizens of every country in the world. You have to do that research for yourself. But I highly recommend, that's probably your step number 1, is figuring out what countries you're actually allowed to go to, what countries are friendly towards digital nomads and allow you to stay for longer periods of time. Some countries are really hard to get visas and you can only stay for a couple weeks. Other countries you can stay for a month, let's say, and then you have to do a border run and then come back and go and come back. And there's other countries, especially nowadays, that are coming out with these digital nomad or remote work visas that allow you to stay up to a year or more without leaving. So really all of these things you need to consider when making your decision. But after you figure out where you can go, you should start thinking about where you want to go. Do you like the beach? Do you like mountains? Do you like being surrounded by other expats in big developed countries? Or do you like more off the beaten path places where you're more immersed in the culture? Is there a type of culture that you like over other cultures? Is there a place where there's food that you like? All of these things go into your consideration on where you should choose as your destination. Once you've narrowed down your list from there, next you have to look at your budget. Some countries are just more expensive than others. The US, Europe, Australia, and other first world countries are usually much more expensive to travel to than places like Central and South America or Southeast Asia. So the type of job that you picked in step number 1 actually is going to affect where you go in step number 2. If you start with a remote job where you're earning the same salary as you earned back home, you have way more options. You don't have to go to a cheap country. But if you decide to start freelancing or your own online business and you're starting from zero, it's much easier to start from zero from a cheap country where your expenses are super low. That's exactly what I did here in Colombia. I started freelancing and my blog, and I had no idea how to do any of that. And when I started, I was earning $0. Now, if I was earning $0 in the United States and I tried to start a business like this, my money and my savings would have ran out super quick. But since I was in Colombia, I was spending probably around $600 or $700 a month total for all of my living expenses, and that allowed my savings to go further so I could focus on growing my business. And the last important consideration you want to make is, how is the Wi-Fi in the country that you're looking to travel to? As a digital nomad, staying connected to the internet is pretty much your financial lifeline. So when you're just getting started and you're still learning the ropes, it's probably a better idea to get your feet wet in a country that has widespread high-speed Wi-Fi. It's easy to find everywhere you go. That's why Thailand and Chiang Mai are one of the most popular places for digital nomads, because it's cheap and also because there's good internet pretty much everywhere you go. Now, once you start to become a more experienced digital nomad and maybe you carry around a digital nomad hotspot, I have a post all about the best digital nomad mobile hotspots for internet around the world. Maybe you have your data, know how to get your data SIM cards in different countries to stay connected as much as possible. Maybe you have your workflow figured out really well so you can go long periods of time without needing fast internet. When you have more experience like this, you can go and start to explore other countries that are known to have worse Wi-Fi situation. Now you may be thinking, now how do you figure out all this Wi-Fi and cost of living and visa information? And the answer is, there's a really awesome website that has a bunch of this information. It's built for digital nomads and it's called Nomad List, and you can find some awesome information there. That said, don't take everything they say as gospel, because some cities they rank low that I actually love. For example, Cali, Colombia is one of my favorite cities in the world and it's ranked pretty low. So it's a good starting place to do your research, but also don't be afraid to branch out and go find other cities by yourself. Speaking of Colombia, if you're stuck on where your first destination should be, we made a video all about living in Colombia as a digital nomad. It's one of my favorite countries in the whole world, so make sure to check that one out as well. Alright guys, we're chugging around here. I hope you're learning a lot. I'm going to try to cover everything in this video, and if at the end there's anything that you still have doubts on or anything that I missed, make sure to leave a comment below and I'll help you out with any questions that you have. Okay, so step 3 to becoming a digital nomad is setting your budget. Again, just like choosing your location, there are tons of different variables involved in setting your budget. We're gonna do another video that gets into the real nitty-gritties, but in this video, we'll quickly cover all of the things step by step that you should consider when you're setting your budget. The first is what we already talked about, and that is your location. Some countries are more expensive than others. You can go on Nomad List and they'll give you an estimated cost of living for cities all around the world. We have personally found that Nomad List overestimates a little bit on what the cost of living will be in each city. We normally spend less than what they say it costs in Nomad List. But again, that all comes down to your standard of living, which is the second factor to consider when setting your budget. Pretty much any country or city you go to, no matter how cheap the country is, you can either spend little or you can spend a lot, and that all depends on your lifestyle. If you want to live a Western lifestyle in one of these cheap developing countries, it's going to cost you a little bit more. It'll be less than at home, but it'll cost you more. But if you're willing to live more like a local, you can save a ton of money on cost of living. And let me tell you guys, a key that I have learned throughout my last 6 years of travel is that humans adapt quickly to their environment. That means if you're living in a huge house like we are right now in the mountains of Colombia, we get used to this huge house and all this space. But then in a couple months from now, when I go back to van life in the US, living in a tiny space, the first couple days are gonna feel uncomfortable, but after that, I'll get used to that too. So just keep in mind, if you're just starting your journey and you're not quite earning enough to live in a big, cushy place in a different country, there's nothing wrong with a temporary downgrade, if you call it a downgrade, and living more like a local for a while. It might feel uncomfortable for the first couple days, but soon you'll get used to it and it'll become the new normal. Now, another thing that you have to consider with your budget is your travel pace. There's digital nomads that try to fly through different countries and see as many different destinations as possible. Maybe they stay 2 or 3 days here, 2 or 3 days there. And then on the other extreme, there's digital nomads who will spend 1 year in one city and then 1 year in another city. And so those are obviously the two different extremes, and depending on where you fall on that scale is going to affect your monthly budget. If you're traveling super fast, you'll have to buy bus and plane tickets every few days. You'll also have to pay the more expensive nightly rate in different accommodations, and you'll probably also be spending more on food because you haven't had time to find the local secret spots. You'll be spending more on tours and excursions because obviously if you're going to a new place all the time, you want to see what it has to offer. And so if you travel fast, your expenses will be significantly higher than if you take it a month at a time or 2 months at a time, where you can get monthly rates for where you stay, or even 3-month or 6-month rates for where you stay, where you're not spending as much on transportation, where you can live like a local. Basically, when you travel slow, you can expect to probably cut your living expenses in half. Now, if you're like me, it's kind of hard to start traveling slow because you'll see all these other travelers seeing all the different places that a country has to offer, and you feel like you can't see it all and that you're missing out, and what's the point? But when you're a digital nomad, you need to kind of flip your switch because you have forever to travel. There's no end to your trip. You can just keep going and going. So it's really important to learn how not to feel rushed. All right, and the last thing that's gonna affect your budget is just your general know-how on how to travel cheaply. And I actually put together a helpful little freebie with all of our best travel hacks that we've learned over the past 6 years, and I will link that download below in the description. Also, I mentioned that our expenses are usually less than those of Nomad List. And so if you're curious to see what our travel lifestyle looks like and the standard of living that we have, I'll link to our Bangkok cost of living video as well as our van life cost of living video, and we're gonna do another one in Colombia in just a few weeks. All right guys, on to step number 4, and that is how much of a savings cushion should you have before you leave home? And guys, I'm gonna give you a super unhelpful answer, and that is whatever you need to have to feel comfortable. It's going to be different for everybody. You have to factor in your current earnings. You have to factor in the cost of living in the destination that you're going to. You have to factor in if you're already earning a steady income or if you're just getting off the ground. And also you have to factor in your confidence level. How confident are you that you'll be able to ramp up your income? Now, I am no financial advisor, so take my advice with a grain of salt. But I would say if you have a remote job and you're already earning a steady income, I would save 3 months of living expenses to use as an emergency fund. On the other hand, if you're just getting started and you're trying to do freelancing, for example, and you're just ramping up, I would bump those savings up to maybe 6 to 9 months of living expenses. Now, depending on your risk tolerance, you might think that's too little or you might think that's way too much. But just keep in mind, when I say 6 to 9 months of living expenses, I'm talking about living expenses in the country you plan to go to. And if you go to a cheap country, that may be as little as $5,000. In the end, the goal is that you're not going to be stressing and worried about money for your entire trip. For some people, super relaxed people, they can just leave without anything and they'll figure it out as they go. But I would say most people aren't like this. Most people want to have some security in the bank to make sure if something goes wrong that they'll be able to cover themselves. And this is what I would recommend as well, but the exact number depends on you. Alright guys, so we've covered the main logistics of how to become a digital nomad. Now we're going to cover some important aspects of living the digital nomad life itself. Let me start by saying that if you're at home right now and you've never done anything like this before, Researching information online can help with an extent to calm your nerves, but really, online research will only get you so far. At some point, you'll need to step outside of your comfort zone and get some real-world experience. The good news is, I'm here to help make that transition as easy as possible. Let's start with finding accommodation. If you've done some backpacking around the world in the past, you may be used to staying in hostels or shared dormitories or places like that, which if we're honest, are some of my favorite places to stay. However, when you become a digital nomad, things are gonna change. You now have to earn money and be productive on the road, and it's really hard to be productive in a hostel. You can try, and maybe you can do it for short periods of time every now and then, but most likely you're gonna have to find your own space. Now, Airbnb is obviously the most convenient option. You can figure out your place before you get there and go straight from the airport to wherever you're staying. You can read reviews that other people have left, but the downside to Airbnb is you're gonna pay for that convenience. If you don't mind paying for that extra convenience, by all means, go use Airbnb. But if you're on more of a tight budget, like I said, just getting off the ground, you may want to arrive, maybe stay in a hostel for a couple days as you go around on the ground and search for different places to stay. This is what we did when we got to Chiang Mai for the first time, and by doing this, we cut our rent by more than half. Now, if it's a popular digital nomad hub like Chiang Mai, you may just be able to walk around and walk up in different apartments in the neighborhood that you're interested in and ask if they have monthly rooms or 3-month contracts or whatever and how much it is. But if you're in other cities that aren't as popular with digital nomads, your best bet may be to look on Facebook. And there's a couple different strategies to use on Facebook. The first is to see if there's any expat Facebook groups for that specific city and just to ask around for advice in there. And the second is to look for rental or real estate groups on Facebook where they constantly post different offers available, people trying to sell property, people trying to rent out property or sublease their rooms. Speaking of subleasing, as we mentioned earlier, the longer the contract you have, the more you'll save money. In Chiang Mai and Bangkok, we saw that the monthly rate for a 6-month contract was less than half of the monthly rate if you're just paying month to month. So what some people do is they'll get a long contract for a year, for example, and they'll stay for a couple months, and then they'll sublease their place out to other travelers. Before you do this, just make sure that it's legal in the city that you want to do it in. Next up is how to stay safe as a digital nomad. Now, safety can be broken up into 2 categories. The first is staying medically safe and healthy, and the other is staying safe from danger. Staying medically safe and healthy, that's usually not that hard. As long as you're covered by a good travel insurance, you should be fine. But please don't skip travel insurance. Speaking from experience, I've saved over $15,000 in medical bills because I bought travel insurance, and the kicker is it was the cheapest travel insurance that money can buy. I think I pay around $40 per month. I'll link to that below. But whatever you do, do not leave home or do not leave your country without buying a travel insurance like this. Now that said, the travel insurance that's best for me may not be the travel insurance that's best for you, depending on your needs. And so I also put together a comprehensive guide comparing all the different travel insurances for digital nomads, and I'll link to that below as well. Now moving on to staying safe from danger. And there's no sugarcoating it. Some places where digital nomads travel to are a little bit shady, a little bit dangerous. The hard part is sometimes gauging just how dangerous the place is, because if you get all your information from the media, you might think it's some kind of war zone. But if you get your information from some sugarcoating travel blogger or YouTuber that says there's no problems and it's perfectly fine, that's also not true. My advice is to always be cautious wherever you go. In Colombia, that means no dar papaya, which is don't give papaya or give anyone a reason to give you trouble, walk around with an expensive cell phone or gold watch or those types of things. But to really get an accurate feel on how to stay safe in whatever destination you want to go to, I highly recommend joining Facebook groups for that specific destination, or Facebook groups for digital nomads. You can ask questions about that destination. And also, once you get to the destination, just ask people. Ask the host of your Airbnb, ask your hotel receptionist. The idea is that you have recent and accurate information from someone who's actually been to the place that you're traveling to. Alright, moving right along. I know this video is getting long, but I got some other awesome tips for you. Now we're going to get into productivity as a digital nomad, which can be one of the hardest things as a digital nomad. This is actually one of the biggest problems that digital nomads face and one of the biggest reasons that they fail. The problem is some digital nomads will over-focus on travel and want to see all the different destinations, and there won't be any time to actually grow their business or make money. On the other extreme are the digital nomads who travel all the way across the world to do something amazing, and then they end up just crunched behind their computer for 24 hours a day and they never get out to enjoy. And so to avoid this, I have 3 different recommendations. The first recommendation we already talked about, and that is to travel slower. The second recommendation is to use different digital nomad productivity tricks, and I made a whole video about that here. And the third is to make sure that you're using all the different tools and resources to make your life easier. You want to work smarter, not harder. And I actually created a full toolkit of all the different free and very cheap tools that I use to run my online business. I'll link to that below. And if you just want a free sample of that, I will link to that as well. All right, next up we have making friends as a digital nomad. And this may not seem like a big deal, but especially if you're traveling alone, it can get pretty lonely, because unlike when you're staying in hostels and you're meeting new people all the time, when you're a digital nomad, you may be off in your Airbnb apartment working by yourself all the time, and it's harder to meet people like that on the other side of the world. And I have 3 possible ways to fix this. The first is to work at co-working spaces, which are basically big offices where all digital nomads and other online entrepreneurs come in to work during the day. This can be a great place to network and meet other like-minded people, but it also can be a little pricey if you're co-working all the time, especially if your Airbnb has perfectly fine internet. The next option is to look for different digital nomad and expat meetup or Facebook groups on the internet. For example, in Cali, Colombia, my base, there's an expat entrepreneur group that meets every week in different restaurants and goes bowling and does a bunch of different fun stuff together. In Chiang Mai, they do different things every single day. It's almost impossible not to find different meetups. And so that's a great option as well. The third option, and this is personally my favorite option, and that is to find a hobby that allows you to immerse yourself in the culture. For me in Colombia, this was starting to take salsa lessons, and I took salsa group classes every single day of the week, and this allowed me to meet a ton of different locals and Colombians, and eventually where I met my wife. So if you can find some sort of hobby like this in whatever city you're staying in, it's a great way to meet up and get to know locals. Alright guys, so we covered a ton of different information so far, and I have one more thing for you. If you've liked this video and found value, make sure to give it a like. It will help it get shown to more digital nomads like yourself. But that final tip for succeeding as a digital nomad is to give FOMO, or the fear of missing out, the middle finger, to travel slowly and to realize that you have all the time in the world. There's really no rush at all. It's really tempting to fall into the trap of seeing all the different amazing places that you want to see, and if you travel slow, how are you ever going to have time to see them? But who cares if you stay in one city for 1 month or 6 months or even 1 year? You're in this for the long haul, and you have all the time in the world. If you can accept that you're never gonna see it all, no matter how fast you travel, if you take breaks when you feel like you need them, and you remember to always stay present and grateful for the freedom that you have that 90% of the rest of the world will never have, if you do those 3 things, you'll maximize your odds of success as a digital nomad and minimize the odds of burning out and giving up. Guys, again, if you're stuck on travel jobs and you don't have any experience, this video will help you a lot. I covered 10 of the easiest travel jobs to start. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.